America's voting demographics that have been quietly happening over the last decade or so, and then suddenly in 2024, the dam broke open. And the concerns are pocketbook, first and foremost, and cultural. 2024, like the podcast election, it's because a lot of younger men especially have opted out of watching drivel and propaganda. In my view, what we are not good at is developing the messenger, getting the right messenger out there and the right message.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Albert Eisenberg, political consultant based out of Philadelphia and contributor at times to the New York Post as well as the National Review. How's it going, Albert?
Hey, Brady. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. A lot of exciting stuff happening in the political world right now. Of course, where the nation is at war with a small asterisk beside it. And we are also experiencing a political realignment in both the Democratic and Republican parties. And I thought it would be fun for us to bring you on and you explain what's happening in those compositional shifts and those demographics.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, largely to set the table, I can share a little about my background, first of all, and kind of how I found myself in the messaging work for mostly Republican campaigns, conservative causes, and really at the heart of the shift in America's voting demographics that have been quietly happening over the last decade or so. And then suddenly in 2024, the dam broke open and, Hispanic voters moved right, white upper middle class voters have moved left, and sort of what's going on, what's causing it, what does that indicate for our future? So largely, grew up in Philly, which is a great place to be from in politics because it is the largest vote center of the Keystone State, the most important swing state in the country of this century, has been every cycle. So kind of grew up and had that sort of normal suburban, like upper middle class upbringing with a couple twists, one of which was my parents were prosecutors. So I had real exposure to what violent crime meant. And it wasn't just sort of an abstract thing. And I was growing up around the kids that I call them the defund the police kids. They're the ones who actually thought like defund the police was a good policy, sounded nice to say. They never have to call the police. So I kind of knew that from a young age, found myself battling against them. We were in the less affluent portion of a pretty wealthy suburb of Philly. So we had a little bit more financial concerns. I was working from a younger age. I went to high school and then I went to Georgetown where everyone was loaded and I was working 2 or 3 jobs. So I ended up having a much stronger sense of, I would say, work ethic and just providing for myself than a lot of the super wealthy kids that ended up being super progressive. But I know how they think. And then 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were Auschwitz survivors or Holocaust survivors. Yeah. So my dad's parents were Polish, Jewish Holocaust survivors, and my mom's mom was a Hungarian Jewish Holocaust survivor. So
very close to home.
Very close to home, and kind of, especially with what's going on with Iran and global war or whatever, I had this understanding growing up that things are not as always as safe and secure as they might appear, and that freedom is a very, very fragile thing that needs to be reinforced and fought for every generation. So that was kind of my formative upbringing. And then getting into politics in Philly, 2016 cycle, very interesting, tumultuous. I had this impulse, just as like my early mid-20s, that the next Republican voter was not going to be some upper middle class suburban mom. Because at that point, everyone was trying to win back the suburbs, right? All these, wealthy...
The fight over the soccer moms.
Soccer moms. So the soccer moms were the 90s, early 2000s. I mean, Bush won them over. Obama won them over. The soccer moms have left the station. And really, I had this inkling that our next voter on the right would be, working, maybe black guy or Hispanic guy in Philly and not in the upper educated suburbs. So my firm began to put that into action way before anybody else in Pennsylvania and then nationally. So we've been at the forefront of this voter shift that we're going to talk about today. At that point, when I was starting my career, it was just a gut impulse and it didn't have a term. And now we call it the political realignment.
What do you think is the fundamental motivation on the conservative side of those voters that once were kind of, maybe you had some Reagan Democrats type people in there, maybe you had some people that were washed out in the Rust Belt, but what was that motivation that was driving the blue collar conservative, or the blue collar individuals to the conservative party?
I think that's an apt comparison of the Reagan Democrats. And I think what people need to connect is that because the country's a lot more diverse, that coalition of people is also a lot more diverse. Those sort of hard hat, vote for some Republicans, but had traditionally voted Democrat. Right now, those people are just proportionately Hispanic. The concerns are the same concerns that shifted white working class voters over so drastically 2016, 2018, 2020, and then Hispanic working class voters have followed, almost just behind 2 or 4 years. And I think personally that black working class voters are following and will continue to follow, and that's going to be the most significant voter shift over the next 4 to 6 years is going to be black working class voters. I think conservatives are going to hit 20 to 30% of those voters if we play our cards right. So the concerns are pocketbook, first and foremost, and cultural, because the left has become run and steered, not just their candidates, but their staffers, their nonprofits. The whole industry has been steered by a very elite fringe of people who I grew up around, so I get how they think and what they really think about America, for example. They have very fundamental beliefs. They've been steered far left on, every race, gender, sexuality, shout your abortion, all this stuff, and then the socialist economic policies.
Yeah, so it seems like that there's this group in society that I like to call the participating people, which are the working class individuals that go to work every day. And then we have this kind of critic, government dependent side of society, where you have people that are students or people that are on that live by their government check, and there's this great separation, and that's where it seems to split, even in racial across racial lines, right? We see the people that are participating in the society are starting to lean conservative. Even you have a lot of people that were in labor unions. You see a lot of the labor unions now realizing that the bread is being buttered by people that want to bring the jobs home. So are you seeing this across all the racial lines as well?
Absolutely. It's very, very interesting. These voters are not monoliths. So let's just take Hispanic voters, for example. Close to 15% of the electorate, they will be soon in America. That's unevenly distributed. States like Arizona, Texas, which are having their primaries as we're recording, California, higher. But in a state like Pennsylvania, it's 10% of the electorate, or will be soon. Within that demographic, you have mostly sort of what you call working class people, non-college or some college, but you have people who are from Puerto Rican backgrounds, who have been here for generations, who the second they move to the U.S. can vote when they have, and then you have people who are from, Mexico. You have people in Texas who are Mexican, who were Texans before it was U.S. territory. You have people who have moved here from the Dominican Republic and who came, to the Bronx and now have gone into Northeast Pennsylvania. So it's really, really diverse within within these groups, and then ideologically, which is what you're talking about. Whereas these groups used to vote in blocks, just like the Irish did 70, 80, 100 years ago, and Jews did when we first came to this country too. As these groups of people become more assimilated, what's happening is the more conservative individuals and the more moderate individuals are shifting their voting intentions to align with that. So that's been the real shift. Hasn't been that the groups as a whole, the self-identification among black voters has stayed about the same. The percentage who call themselves liberal or progressive, maybe a third, moderate, maybe a third, conservative, maybe a third. The difference now in 2024 and hopefully going forward is that the people who self-identify as conservative are much more likely to vote Republican now.
I gotcha. But then you also have the added component of the gender war that seems like that those in academia have been very effective at splitting the sexes. We have this group of young women that are going to college more frequently than the young men, and then you also see this tremendous split in their political opinions, and it's affecting relationships, affecting employment. It's affecting the way movies and TV shows are written. You have more you have more writers that are I think 60+% of the writers in Hollywood are female now, and that affects the end product, which it turns out to be a little bit propaganda driven. So, are you seeing that that's going to continue, or are you seeing that maybe some of that is starting to shift back? Are we getting any return anywhere of females to conservatism, of young females?
Oh, good question. Actually, I believe the shift among young women to Republicans from a lower base was more significant to the right, like net, than young men from like 2022 and 2020 to 2024, because there was, and that's really an affordability issue. But I think you're right, and I don't think that when you look at current, not just undergrad, but higher, like master's and PhD programs, the gender split is if anything getting worse. So that's an upstream metric. Downstream from that is people having relationship issues and voting differences and societal tension. The upstream metric is, people self-sorting into this or that class of people. So I don't really see that necessarily getting better. I do think there are opportunities for Republicans to go on offense with younger voters, younger women, and younger men. And I also think that, and we could talk about those, and I also think that people are self-sorting with their media consumption. So 2024 in my industry, political industry, not just politics, but there's a whole, there's so much money, there's a whole infrastructure behind all these campaigns that we see the ads for every 2 years, every year. But that's why they call 2024 like the podcast election. It's because a lot of younger men, especially, have opted out of watching drivel and propaganda, and they're like, all right, I'm just going to go listen to some guys chat.
Right. So, and you see the men that are participating in the podcast, and you see that there's certainly been a resurgence of strong conservatism. When I reach out to my friends' kids, I'm seeing stronger conservative principles much further to the right than the traditional, I would say, Republican Party of under George Bush. But on the female side, what I'm seeing is there's a lot more focus on, they seem to be really focused on credibility and degrees, and you see that education is this almost liberalizing factor amongst women. And what do you think it is that the more a person is educated, the more liberal they become? And that's what we're seeing as we're talking about the shift in this party, right? It's becoming the elitist, the higher level degree party.
Absolutely, across ethnic, racial, religious gender lines. The more educated, the more Democrat. And this is, I believe, 2024 was the first election in generations that Republicans won the under $50,000 a year voters. So that's really symbolic for what the Trump coalition is. I think younger women, just because like gender is real, like let's just say that.
Absolutely.
Younger women tend to be more socially attuned and more worried about their status within social rankings. I think every young person's really attuned to that, but especially young women. And then the opportunities for younger men, basically in a society where people have to go out and earn their own keep. We're not in a society where a man can earn enough as a working guy to support a whole family unless you live in a really affordable area. Women are going to have to go work, and it's not like most of them are going to opt into the hard hat, fields. Right. So that's probably going to keep sorting, I would think. It sounds like you pretty much agree with that.
Yeah. And as a bigger picture, as you view this landscape and it's shifting, what are maybe some of the more obscure movements within it that you are seeing that maybe other people are missing? And what are some of the more spectacular and positive shifts for conservatives? Because we all want hope, right? And hope is a powerful thing. It's very important in a political movement. And where are you seeing in the numbers that we have hope for the near term?
As conservatives, I think we have the advantage on policy, especially when we're sane. And when I should say, we are the more sane ones on every major policy, in my view. What we are not good at is developing the messenger, getting the right messenger out there and the right message. So I'm gay. I work on gay issues from the right, and I have a much more reputable voice for a swing voter, because it's harder to say I'm homophobic or transphobic or this or that. Now, when you have somebody, if I'm making the case, because I work on this nationally, if I'm making the case against child gender transitions, the medical and surgical transition of youth and adolescents, the way that I can speak about it, it becomes an 80-20 issue, because I know how to talk about it authentically. On the other hand, when you have people who are more concerned about getting headlines for themselves, and I'm talking about Republicans in Congress at times, the fringe ones, who are saying that's a man in a dress, for example, that actually alienates people. That alienates people in the middle who think, well, that's just gratuitous. You're being mean. Like, I don't really want that person in my locker room, but like, don't be mean. Don't be a nasty person, right? So that's just one example. But on any number of issues, I think the GOP is closer to the median voter than the Democrats are, and certainly where the energy is. Abortion. Trump, pretty standard, right? Like, he hasn't even gone on offense on that one. And I think it's much more comfortable being a pro-choice Republican than a pro-life Democrat. So I think we have the advantage on a number of issues. I think on the economy, we still have the advantage and can have the advantage. I think the immigration debate, we have the advantage or had it. And we could, especially if we elevate Spanish-speaking people, Hispanic messengers, which I work a lot in Pennsylvania and nationally, is developing our farm team of Hispanic conservatives, supporting candidates, reaching Hispanic voters. Getting those voices out there are much more persuasive than a lot of what we've been doing before. So just to, I guess, synthesize here is, I think if we spend more time and energy developing the right messenger and reaching people who should be on our side if they hear from us, working people of all backgrounds, we will be able to really go on offense and win a lot more seats.
Yeah, I speak fluent Spanish. I've worked in Mexico for many, many years.
Very cool.
And I grew up in Texas. I'm very influenced by this culture. Tons of friends, workers, and what I'm seeing, and my big concern now, at least from the perspective of the working Hispanic population in Texas, is that with the movement that we've, with the current policy, and we're trying to deport as many criminals and then people that have just skipped on their hearings, there's been a tremendous loss of construction workers in South Texas, which has driven the price of homes up, which in turn makes it less affordable for the Hispanic community to purchase homes. And you're seeing some of that starting to breed resentment, and which makes me want to it begs the question, Albert, are we putting some of those, maybe those new gains that we've had in South Texas, are we putting them at risk with the current immigration policy?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a snapback. You can see this in polls. For me, I think the message needs to be like, hey, we all saw, especially in South Texas, you guys saw people, your cities and neighborhoods and counties became just like super highways for migrants, and not just from Mexico, from all over the world coming through and ruining your quality of life. So we all saw it. Now we need to do very difficult things to secure our country and secure the people that are here legally, because that's all our priority, and we agree on that. That's something a super majority of voters, majority of Hispanic voters agree on. It's why places like Stark County flipped, 97% Hispanic at the border, flipped Republican for the first time in, I think, 100 years. So I think we need that message. We have to make hard decisions that are going to cause short-term pain in order to secure our country and prioritize the people here legally. And I think that the admin and that people in Congress, people in Texas, people in the border communities, everywhere need to be out in Spanish language media with people like yourself. I'm not fluent. I can kind of practicar, but I'm not I'm not going to tell you I'm fluent. They need to develop people for Spanish language media. They need to have Hispanic voices who are able to present what the admin is doing with a compelling message that's going to hit for working people. And hey, we do know what just happened in Iran. That's going to raise oil prices temporarily. But what's really going to raise oil prices or the cost of life is if Iran develops a nuke in the long term. So there's something to be said long term for everything the admin's doing. We just need to go and reach the people that are affected by it. And I think that step that I like to help, I mean, that's my firm. That's what my firm does, is build a bridge to the people who should be on our side. That's what I think is missing more on our side.
So are you finding that the GOP is being effective at developing its farm teams in the Hispanic communities? Because I think now that we're talking about this is critical. If you want control of the House, you're going to have to get this message right. You're going to have to find communicators that transfer enthusiasm to these voters, that get them to the polls. Is the GOP, are they approaching it with the sensitivity that is necessary to accomplish this?
I think we've done a lot on our side, and I think like Tom Emmer at the NRCC over the last few cycles when he was chair, like every time they issued a press release for like the frontline races, it was like 13 out of 14 of our flips, I think in 2022, were either veteran or like minority, somebody from minority background. So I think that we know that these candidates who are from who just don't look like your standard Republican, let's say, are going to have crossover appeal just naturally if they're solid people. And that is going to that's going to benefit us. And I think the GOP has realized that from a very low point in like the 2010s and has gotten on board. That being said, I do not think we've done nearly enough to develop the farm team of talent and also just like continually translate our message. Because like what I like to say is Democrats have always on PR. It's called the legacy media. So yeah. Republicans need always on messaging, and like it's not enough for you to go on urban radio with an ad when you're campaigning every 6 years. If you're a senator, you should be doing like whatever the main urban radio station is in the largest city in your state. You should be on that once every week or once every month for just an open, even though it might be hostile, just an interview, and you should be friendly and you should be prepared.
Yeah. I'd like to talk to you about some of these races that are taking place. And since we're talking about Texas, we have the Brandon Herrera race, right? And it's getting a lot of press right now. And it looks like there's a pretty good chance that Tony Gonzalez is going to be unseated. If Brandon wins that, does that create an opportunity for the Democrat Party? I think Tony won it last time. I think he had like 65% or something of the vote. But do you think that this creates an opportunity for the Democrats to spend a lot of money and treat it more like an open seat?
Yeah, I mean, short answer is yes. Couple things are happening in our national politics. If you are aside from the personal scandals which are affecting that race, but last time around in that race that you're mentioning with Tony Gonzalez on a majority of the Texas border is what he controls. If you are attacked by your own party, it generally makes things easier for you in a tough general election. So if you can get through a primary, it makes you more electable, which is a problem. Okay. It's a problem for Democrats and for Republicans, is that if you're showing independence, you're going to be likely to be primaried and lose. But if you get through that primary, you're more electable. So Tony Gonzalez has consistently shown independence, and now he's enmeshed in like terrible personal scandals that, like, you know, his former aide, pregnant, killed herself. Not clear or verified like what the veracity of is, but it's multiple reports. It's really bad headlines. And Herrera, from what I can tell, is a very fringe, you know, online figure. So the answer
Second Amendment focused. Yep.
Right, which is great. It takes all kinds. I'm sure you're very pro 2A. You know, I grew up in a city, so I'm not like a super gun person.
I know Brandon. I like him a lot, and I really think he's geared to bring constitutional conservatism into the Congress. I'm just wondering, like you're saying, Tony went through a vetting process and survived it in the past. And what happens now? How is that race going to be vetted? And is it a vulnerability? But do you still think it turns out that it leans Republican or?
I think that district leans Republican for sure. I think there's an absolute snapback. Like, I don't think Tony Gonzalez was going to win by the same margin in 2026 as he was in 2024 outside of the scandals, just because it is so majority Hispanic, and Hispanic voters shifted pretty quickly right over the last 4 or 5 years and now have sort of shifted back to the center. They're a true persuadable swing voter audience. Okay. So that was already going to be tougher. And then at the very best for Texas Republicans, they're going to have to spend a lot more money, and it's going to be a big distraction.
Okay. Well, since we're still in Texas, let's talk about Vicente Gonzalez. What's happening in his race?
So in 2024, we had Mayra Flores, who was a pretty popular online figure. She was kind of like a darling on the conservative right, and she staked out positions that were very pro-life, which I'm respectful of, obviously. Like I said with the 2A, I think it takes all kinds. But it was not the type of way of talking about things that wins over swing districts. So she underperformed the GOP wave among Hispanic voters, and Gonzalez narrowly held on in a very working Hispanic district that I believe borders the Gulf right there, mostly on the east side of the Gulf side of Texas. So Gonzalez held on by about 4 points. I think, just plainly speaking, I think it's going to be an easier year for him just because of where the political winds are and where Hispanic voters are especially. But he's really hanging on. He's an older school Democrat, majority maker for them. And it's less and less comfortable for representatives like that. I think he was potentially one of the 2 Democrats that voted on men and women's sports. He voted with Republicans. He's not crazy left. And I just don't know how many cycles he's got left in him.
Yeah. Moving on into maybe some of the Senate races where, well, we'll talk about Mike Lawler in a minute, but I'm really interested to see what happens in Georgia with Ossoff. It seems like that there's a couple of these races, Collins and his, which are going to be determinative for the Senate. Do you think that is a possible flip for the Republicans?
I think it could be. Just demographically, Georgia's a really interesting state, and I'm between Pennsylvania and South Carolina, so Georgia's next door for me. It is a third black, and a lot of the black voters in Georgia are upper middle class. They've moved from elsewhere in the Northeast and across the country. Atlanta is a mecca for black business. So you have a combination there of upper educated and upper income, and black, which skews very Democrat. And these are people, this is where Raphael Warnock came out of, the radical left pastor, right. Radical left, great Christian, whatever he is. And then you have 10% Hispanic voters in northwest of the state. You got a lot of ag. You have a lot of Hispanic working people, and then the northern suburbs of Atlanta. You have a huge and booming Asian voter population. So the way to win that type of state. Oh, and then within the black community, there's a lot of African immigrants too in Georgia who are way more culturally conservative and fiscally conservative. So the way, if you're campaigning, is to split those voters out and make sure you're getting appeals to all of them, right? As far as Ossoff, he's really had easy races. Anybody who's politically minded knows that Trump was at war with the Georgia GOP.
Oh, yeah.
In his first term, we had a bunch of special elections. It was just really a mess. So it's less of a mess now. Brian Kemp showed a lot of leadership, but we have a messy primary. Ossoff doesn't. By the way, that's my political doppelganger, I've been told, is John Ossoff. So
okay.
If anybody wants to book me for a John Ossoff impersonator ad, I would be glad to do it.
You're the guy.
You heard it here first. I'm available. So that's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a tight, it's hard to flip a U.S. Senate seat. In 2024, there were 7 swing states. Only one of them flipped a U.S. Senate seat, and that was mine, Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick won by 14,000 votes out of, I don't know, 700,000 cast. I might be wrong on that, but it was a very, very, very small percentage. So it's going to be a knife fight, but on paper, we should be fighting in Georgia. I would give Ossoff the advantage.
So Georgia itself, for whatever reason, has become this kind of it's almost like a miniature Pennsylvania. It's starting to become something more of a purple state. Is there something that leadership at the state level and the Republican Party can do that they're not doing to help communicate to those conservative voters? It seems like that there's some, when you talk about messaging, that seems like a place in the past that it's been very patchy for the Republicans. I know a part of that was that that Kemp and Raffensperger and Trump were fighting, and it just seemed like a place that the Republicans didn't have it together. But there also seems to be this sense that they can't get the message across the line there.
Yeah, I think in order to reach voters who are not within the GOP base, you have to develop reputable messengers and messages. So if I'm in charge of the Georgia GOP, and this is something they've done effectively in Florida, and I think they have done this well in Texas as well, is cultivating people from the grassroots, local county office, state ledge, up, and then like the conservative nonprofits. We need to develop, the people that are on the ground, that are connected, that are already naturally conservative, need to be reached and sort of mobilized to be influencers within their communities. Those people need to run for state and local office. Those people need to be in the media. They need to be, honed as spokespeople. And then as far as paid media, there's a million examples I could give you about the lack of outreach by the consultant class on my side to bother to translate something for like an Asian print publication or like a Spanish language radio ad, which is so not that hard to do. I mean, it requires vision, it requires translation, it requires effort, but like getting in front of a lot of these. So like partly it's the what I described first is like the grassroots direct contact community engagement side, and then there's the paid messaging and the making sure you're going on the radio. So like if I was Georgia GOP or Kemp or whoever's going to be our next this, that, and the other thing, I'd be making sure I had Spanish language spokespeople. I'd be making sure I had somebody on staff who's from the growing African community to shepherd me through and tell me what's going on.
Yeah, it seems like that one of the good things about reaching the Spanish community is that they are very receptive to radio, and that once you have these smaller kind of these subgroups in the United States that have their own media, they're very focused on keeping their culture and interaction with the culture, which does provide you a good pipeline to them if we're just utilizing it.
Yeah, I have said in so many conversations, the most cost-effective new Republican voter registration machine is Spanish language radio, because these are working people going through their lives, guys on the construction site where this stuff's blaring all day, women, who are working, who have this in the background, nurses, whatever it is, who are listening all day. And it's cheap. It's really cost effective to do, some digital and some Spanish language stuff. And you would not believe the people who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars at the U.S. Senate level who are not translating a lick of their materials into Spanish. And to me, what pisses me off and what motivates me as somebody in the political industry is the unforced errors on our side. I'll give you one other example. Michigan and Wisconsin, both states decided by less than 2 points the U.S. Senate race, significant black voter population. Nothing done on urban radio, no specific mail to black households that's custom tailored for black households, no digital audio. I mean, you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars as campaign consultants. You have to allocate some of that budget to specifically targeted, tailored messaging. And we would have 2 more U.S. Senate seats if that was done.
Well,
out of 100.
Yeah.
So
that's an unfortunate oversight. Do you think that they're learning from that? I mean, I imagine part of your job is communicating to them and developing those opportunities for them to execute against it. But right now, does their ass hurt where it's been burned?
That's a great way of putting it. I think people recognize that Trump 2024, the campaign apparatus, not necessarily Trump himself. I think Trump gets it, but also the campaign apparatus that's behind every candidate and elected official understood that they needed to do urban outreach for younger black men, understood they needed to do Spanish language and Hispanic voter outreach. And I think when you have somebody leading like that, there's naturally going to be mimicry and people like, oh, that worked, let's do more of it. So I think there's some understanding on our side, but I think we haven't done nearly enough of it.
Well, and it kind of, this also begs the question, when you have Trump, which Trump, good or bad, I mean, he gets the screen time, and Trump is able to drive the story and the agenda in a direction that he chooses, and sometimes it might go off into some tangentials. But overall, he has been very effective at reaching these lost voters, or the parties, the people that the Democrats left behind. What is going to happen? Everyone wants to know, and everyone's wondering, in a post-Trump world, what kind of communication is going to take place to maintain that connection with the voters? And do you think that we have the talent to do it? Does Marco Rubio come across, who is a very intelligent guy, but is he speaking above people? Is Vance, is he able to reach people the same way that Trump is? I see your cat. Hear your cat there. Hey, kitty.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. Hey, man, go. You might need to pet him, give him a little bit of love. Sometimes, they just want a little attention like the rest of us.
I think he wants a snack.
Yeah. So, but what's your thought? Are they going to be able to maintain the connection that has been built up through the Trump machine?
Yeah. So we were living in a very diverse country that is kind of frayed in a lot of ways. Like a lot of our societal,
it's fragmented.
Yeah. We're really fragmented. So when you talk about like the median voter, that median voter, like probably like a woman with like 2 years of college, like some college, maybe lives in like a middle-class suburb, like whether that person is in or married to somebody in the trades or is like a teacher, I think like that's a distinction. Like, is it more blue collar leaning, more white collar leaning? Like, I think like Vance will appeal to the latter more so potentially, and Rubio will appeal more to the white collar, Vance more to the blue collar. And we are in like a pretty educated country. So it's just complicated when you talk about like the median voter. I think we have a real talent, a strong bench on the Republican side. I would not want to be the Democrats. And I think the thing that we have going for us, which is kind of unfortunate, to be honest, I think the animating factor in U.S. politics is that we're not the other side. And that's been the case. That's been the most animating thing for Democrats against Republicans, too. Like, the way they get their voters out is to tell them that the world's ending because of Republicans, vice versa. So what Republicans have going for us is that we are not in thrall to a complete elitist fringe, base, but like group of people steering our party.
Yeah, I mean, if the Republicans were a bar, it'd be like the bar from Cheers, and if the Democrats were a bar, it'd be the bar from Star Wars. It's gotten too foreign to the person that is paying their bills and working. Those topics never even around, 2014, 2016, these topics started entering the discussion, and they entered as almost comedy, but they were purveyed with such stench and veracity and vitriol that they became the common discussion in America. And so I think a lot of people, when they go to the water cooler, they are just searching, they just want stability. It's really interesting that it's gotten to where those destabilizing factors that they say diversity is a strength. Well, fragmentation is not. And when you divide people up by education, gender, and just so many of those different strata, you end up with a lot of people feeling alone. You end up with a lot of people feeling like that there isn't a community for them. And that's where I see like some of the difficulty in getting the messaging is how do we reach those fragmented, lonely people? But I do agree with you that the Republican bench looks way better than the Democrat bench. And I don't see them developing talent that is going to be able to communicate with these people that have moved to the conservative side. When we go up to Maine and we talk about Susan Collins, it's just she's just an interesting character. It's like the Republican that we have that the conservatives, they don't even want to admit that she's one of us. It's kind of hard to tell it, but she's the ugly sister and the devil we know. And is she gonna win a sixth term, or what are you thinking?
If she does, conservatives better be really, really happy about it. Because you got to go back to, this woman stood on the Senate floor and defended Brett Kavanaugh at a moment where it was so not popular for her. And I think that's the difference. People use words like moderate or conservative.
Yeah.
When you think about somebody who's moderate, we think about Lisa Murkowski and we think about Susan Collins. And I will never forget observing the smears and the character attacks on Kavanaugh. I mean, the most atrocious, ridiculous, far-fetched media campaign. And this is a woman who, as a principled stance, which you and I know is so rare, just stood on the floor and did the right thing on that. And I just, I think it was Maya Angelou said people will remember what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Made them feel.
That's just something I remember. And for me, I'm like, we can't lose sight that, like, this is a vote for our majority leader. This is a vote on 80% of our stuff. And nobody else is going to win a U.S. Senate seat in Maine. She's been our only Republican from the New England, any part of Congress from above New York for years.
You got to be grateful for it.
We might flip that congressional seat if we're lucky with Jared Golden retiring, who, by the way, Democrats hate. For the same reason that a lot of Republicans hate Democrats. I think I'm a big tent guy, and I'm a let's win more elections guy. So Maine Senate, I mean, that woman outran Trump by 17 points. She
Wow.
beat, and she was a dead woman walking. I mean, if you were talking not just in March of 2020, but in September of 2020, she was the only one who thought she was going to win, and she won by 7 points. And the split, Trump lost Maine, I believe, by 10 points, and she won Maine by 7 points. I mean, that's a huge.
That's impressive.
It's gonna be a knife fight this year, no doubt. And there's a very interesting primary there between online left, new progressive versus like a real establishment governor, Janet Mills. So it's a really interesting race, Brady, and like I'm gonna be involved probably on the outside with some groups I'm working with. But I love Susan Collins, and I think people like that deserve more appreciation because they make our majorities. And it doesn't matter to win elections. You can't do shit if you don't hold power.
Right. Well, I like that you're passionate about this, and I kind of want to ask you what motivates you as you're going in this, because this is about as dirty as a business as a person could be in. Friends are hard to earn. The relationships are often difficult to maintain. It's similar to the movie industry. You're only as good as your last flop. What motivates you to put your life energy into this space?
That's a great question because it's not easy every day. I mean, any entrepreneur, because I run a consulting firm, so any entrepreneur in any industry is basically putting on the weight of the world and fighting every day. And then you add on that we're talking about real major issues in a political culture that, like, we're talking March 2026 right now. Like, I wouldn't say our political culture's gotten better. I'm glad we had a counterbalance in 2024, but like things are not great in America in 2026 as far as our society, I would say. And I think we have a lot of strengths, but I think we need to work really, really hard to be more unified and paint a larger picture. I think what motivates me is kind of what I talked about from my personal background at the beginning of our conversation of, the world, we shouldn't take for granted what we have in the world, and it is worth fighting for. It's worth for good, normal people who have the right intentions to be engaged, even in the dirty business of politics. Because if I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? And I like making majorities. I like reaching and expanding the GOP base. I think everyone deserves to be appealed to. I think a regular working like black mom in Philly, where I'm from, deserves to hear our message because she's been looked over for generations. And there's millions of people out there that deserve to hear our message. And if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. So that's why I took the step. I'm not Spanish. I'm not Hispanic. I can understand. And I'll tell you the amount of people in 2024 in Spanish who brought up the weird ideology in schools with gender. Multiple people, a month have brought that up to me in the lead up to 2024. So my firm did the only Spanish language work on the right for Republicans because somebody needed to. So that's kind of motivating to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're casting a net in that direction. The last race that I want to talk to you about is still up in the Northeast, and it's that Lawler race. Is that the canary in the gold mine that's going to tell us what's going to happen everywhere?
That is going to be, it's one of those races where it's like, how much crossover appeal can somebody have in today's political environment? And that district's really interesting. It's about a third Hispanic. And that might be an exaggeration. It might be 20% Hispanic. It's very Hispanic and it's very Jewish. And both of those voter groups have gone right in recent years. And if anybody should be happy about the Trump admin, it would be the pro-Israel contingent. I certainly am. And the left has completely jumped the shark on, their priorities are defending people who are chasing Jewish kids around college campuses, yelling, legalize the Intifada or globalize the Intifada. It's crazy how far left these people have come. So Lawler has a lot of connections in that community. He's going to need to outrun the Democratic baseline because it's a D+ district, and New York Democrats are brutal with their district drawing, but it will definitely be telling. I think that the question is, how much can one Republican outrun and create ticket splitters in this environment?
Okay. And so we're speaking of the Jewish voters. It seems like that there has been a tremendous shift in the presence on online anti-Semitism, as well as just I think the left in particular has really alienated a lot of Jewish voters. It's surprising to me that they haven't alienated more. And, I'm wondering, what is that? Is that old habits are hard to break, or do you think that that's going to be a growing part of the Republican electorate?
Yes, it will be a growing part of the Republican electorate. Yes, old habits are hard to break. There are people from all sorts of communities, including just standard white, non-Jew, whatever, who are ideologues first. And whatever their side says is what they're going to do. These are the black people who were thrust into the front with the defund the police stuff. It's the same as the Jews for progressive causes. It's all right, we'll put you guys up as useful talking pieces to defend what's really going on, which isn't good for the people that we're supposedly advocating for, right? So there are people who are so attached to their ideology that they don't really care to defend, or they can't kind of understand both. But yeah, Jews have definitely shifted to the right. There's been an explosion in anti-Semitism in general online. I log on. I understand, and I'm not in the business of calling people anti-Semites for this or that reason. I think there's too much crying wolf about racism and homophobia and anti-Semitism and blah. But if you are hyper fixated on Israel and Jews and this is the cause of all the problems, you're simplifying things, and you have a mental issue. So the right actually has caught up, unfortunately. I think a lot of the anti-Semitism stuff veiled as we're just asking questions about Israel, or this is the one group of people you can't criticize. I see that a lot on the right, and I'm I don't see anybody else advocate. I don't see any other group that's people are marching the streets to support terrorism against them. So like you're definitely allowed to criticize and be anti-Semitic. I'm seeing it all over the place. But as far as, more engaged Jewish people, there's been an absolute shift to the right. It was really consequential in Pennsylvania and elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, and so I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I've worked very close with them for a long time. And one of the things, right on, Baruch Hashem. So, but what I find is, so Israel is an ethno-state, and all governments do things that people criticize. America had a lot of bad wars, right? But America's not an ethno-state. And so what happens is there's this fallout that precipitates to Jewish people themselves when there's some type of war that, Israel is pushing. And then there seems to be this ridiculous type of interpretation in a lot of society that, like, do you think the average Jewish guy has Bibi Netanyahu's number on quick dial?
Right.
And there seems to be an inability to make the distinction between the Israeli government and the average Jewish guy.
Yeah, I would say that. And I also just feel like, I'm like an old school, like, more speech is good speech. So like, as long as you're like respectful and not personally insulting, like, I don't mind if people want to make the case that supporting Israel against Iran is not America first. Like, that's a principled case you can make. I think it's wrong. Right. I think Iran has been killing American civilians for 47 years, and they wake up and say death to America every week. So like, I'm willing to make that argument. I'm not trying to shut anybody down about it. But yeah, I think that, and I'd like your opinion on this, because I like to ask people, as a Jewish person and as somebody who really cares about Western civilization, I think Israel's a defender of Western civilization. What do you think has gone wrong in the messaging on the right around this question?
Well, I think it comes down to that we're a society that is really focused on image, and I mean actual physical image. And it was very easy to proliferate the war in Gaza in a way that was a PR catastrophe for Israel. If you look at this as a personal thing, I think a lot of Americans would say, if someone came into your neighborhood and killed and raped members of your friends and family, and then you retaliated with the lust for revenge that any of us would have, you would probably go pretty damn scorched earth if you had the ability to. If you had the power to do that, you would probably do the same thing. But the blowback is, Israel is such a small portion of the world, and so you have to fight the entire non-Israel media establishment's propaganda arm, and it is overwhelming. How many accounts are there that are pumping anti-Israeli information? Yeah. So I think it really comes down to just the volume of images, and then just the volume of information that comes down. That there is a tidal wave of that I think really knocked Israel off of its perch. Because when I was growing up, I grew up in a Southern Baptist, and everybody, all the families take trips to Israel. That's the Bible. That's the Holy Land.
Oh yeah.
And there's and still amongst my father's age, and probably a lot of guys my age, there's a tremendous reverence for Israel. But when you get down to the college age, there seems to be, I'm fine with people questioning Israel. I'm fine with people questioning the roles of people in powerful positions and what they do. But I don't like the blanket blame that Jewish people are taking for Israelis' actions. I do have a lot of compassion for people that lost their families and their retaliations. So I kind of see it through, what would you do if someone just damaged your family that way? And I don't know that message was communicated well. I don't think that it was brought home enough to people that said, hey, if your daughter was carried off, locked in a box and raped for 300 days, how would you feel?
Yeah, I think you're right. I would say that's a very emotionally resonant point, which I think is how people make their decisions. People feel like they're sort of logical. I'm going to make whatever the logical decision. But you're right. It's the emotionally resonant, compelling message that hits home where voters can kind of understand these issues in their own terms. And I think a lot of what's happened on the American left with regard to Israel Palestinians and Israel and the rest of the world is they projected what I'd say is like a George Floyd, like racial polarized mentality projection onto the Middle East, where they view Israelis as white guys like me, whereas actually Israel is incredibly diverse, and most of the Jews, first of all, there's tons of Christians. It's the only country in the Middle East, by the way, the Christian population is growing. Tons of Muslims, it's very multi-ethnic. There's a lot of Jews from Arab backgrounds. And then on the right, I think that there's a lot of suspicion about the establishment and about, the medical establishment, the business establishment. Like all these institutions have corrupted themselves before our eyes in our lifetimes. And I think that there's sort of a projection of that onto like the Israel is controlling American foreign policy stuff. So I think a lot of people tend to kind of project what their own frame onto other things. That's just basics. So I like how you approach that in like, let's set this standard as far as a personal experience.
Well, the way you communicate to people is through humanity. And I think there is some virtue in some of the positions on the left when they care about the supposedly the people that are out of power or the people that are vulnerable. But what happens is, if you look at the history of leftism, it ends up making that individual less powerful and more vulnerable. And there's just a history there that it's a history lesson that is not taught to people, and academia does not propagate that message to students. It's always that the less powerful deserve more reverence, the less powerful are being mistreated. But it doesn't show the end effect where those people are starving, those people are shifted off into camps. And I would like it to be, as conservatives, what we really have to do is we have to find fraternity in our fellow man, and we have to communicate that we are there, we share his concerns, and we want to help, and we want our personality to be that of a good neighbor. And as the one thing that Bill Clinton could do, man, he was the best at this, is you felt like that guy was talking to you on the other side of your fence. And then you had Obama, who was very professorial, and you felt like that you were in good hands. Those people really connected with people. And the way that Trump did it like that unhinged, empowered guy. He was this wealthy entrepreneur, and he could talk shit better than anybody, and people liked it because he was a fighter. But he wasn't a soft sell. Trump was a hard sell. And what I think that we need to do, if we're going to build out this base for time, for an enduring conservative movement, is we need that softer sell to get into the moms. We need to penetrate some of these groups that we haven't in the past. And those candidates were really good at that. And we need to explore finding the talent. I think J.D. Vance can do that. But I think there's probably some other people that are going to be up and coming that might be able to do it better.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you say that, because like when I think about, I'm in my mid-30s. When I think about becoming a fully adult man, it is about becoming a well-rounded individual that I can do. I got my home construction stuff back in back of me. I do renovation. I'm running a business. I'm a good family man. I support my siblings and parents. And what you're talking about is a conservative movement and a Republican Party that is more well-rounded and is able to look at our deficits and account for them. And that's the softer side, but it's not just like presenting a better, softer, it's like channeling all the emotions, like humanity, empathy, listening. I think those are really underdone on our side, and we would win a lot more if we developed that.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to this, and this is what I find is interesting. If you look at the splits in the parties, is that liberal women are not having children. You don't have much of an investment in the future if you don't have kids. But we have conservative people that still are, and even in the Hispanic communities that are having more kids than the Anglo communities. I think our message should be, if you want to build a family, come with us, because that's where the future is. I mean, we'll breed them out. We'll breed them out effectively, and I think that's a very good way to approach it. Is all those things that come down, like we used to talk about what would happen to the conversations at the kitchen table when people were paying their bills. We need to have compassion for the human experience, and we need to express that, and we need to speak truth to power and transfer the enthusiasm that if you are going to grow a family, you need to come to the Conservative Party. We care about your kids. We care about your education. We care about your job, and we want to bring all that. We want to bring all that home. And we didn't get a chance to talk about tariffs and immigration, but I kind of wanted to end on that. It's interesting that 2 weeks ago everything was tariffs and immigration, and now everything is Iran war. But I do believe that probably the immigration issue is going to be very critical, and how we message that is mission critical coming into the midterms.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a lot to say here, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, kind of with this overall view of what the conservative movement needs to do to take advantage of this realignment that's happened in our politics. I would say we should have empathy, and whatever your opinion is on American foreign policy, you cannot not be heartened when you see the crowds of Venezuelans in January who poured onto U.S. streets celebrating this evil dictator being taken.
Hooray.
And then the Iranians this week. I mean,
I have no love lost for exploding mullahs.
No, and I don't. I think you're right. I'm not saying that people who oppose the actions do. I want people to take pride in that, and then I want our party and our movement to think about other groups of people who deserve similar treatment, and we need to it's like a surgeon, find the problem and get to it. So if you're talking about young voters who cannot afford a home, that's not a talking point. That maybe it's more like a firefighter. Rush to that and solve it. If you're talking about Puerto Rican voters who literally have family who can't get electricity regularly, even though they're American citizens, go to that and fix that, and then tell people you fixed it, because I think that's how we win more elections. As far as immigration, I think just channeling that, be humane. You can deport people. People who are here illegally are here illegally. They committed a crime. I think that's okay to say. And I am personally for probably some path. I'm for some sort of path forward.
I am too. There needs to be work permits, something.
I think these people should be, I think they shouldn't be on welfare. I think they should be paying back for the privilege of earning a spot in our country. But regardless of your opinion on it, be humane. You could deport people, and we should be deporting people, people who are committing other crimes, and frankly, people who aren't. That's up for debate. I'm open to that debate. But it shouldn't be shock and awe all the time. And it should definitely be, it should be compassionate, and it should be compassionate to Americans and people who are here legally. That's who we should be. That's what this policy is compassionate towards. And letting 10 to 20 million people in illegally was not compassionate. And we need to say that from that angle, and I think we'll win a lot more.
Well, Albert, it has been very refreshing. Thank you for illuminating the studio and for bringing in a ray of brilliance. And I hope that your message is not taken lightly by the GOP, the NRCC. I know that they could learn a lot from your perspective, and I hope it's implemented, and I hope it brings the returns home. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brady. We're working, so put your prayers up for more work to come.
Amen. Thanks, bro.
Thank you.